Welcome ladies and gentlemen, Tactical Lich here, and today we are looking at a battle between the High Elves led by Mr. Teufel and the Wood Elves led by Hard Rust Warrior. For Mr. Teufel here, he is going for a rather interesting army build. Instead of the usual Shadow Warriors, he is going for the upgraded version of the High Elf skirmishers, the Shadow Walkers. Not only do they have better melee stats and missile stats, they also have poison to their attacks in both melee and ranged. On top of that, they also have a bit of anti-infantry bonus due to their dual-wielding swords. As for how effective they can be against the Wood Elves, we shall see. Though traditionally, the High Elf skirmishing play can be powerful against the Wood Elves due to the Wood Elves' lack of armor. As for the rest of the army, we have some spears mixed in with rangers. They are excellent at dealing with the light armored Wood Elf infantry with their anti-infantry bonus. As for mobility, we have an elite cavalry at the back, the Fireborn. They are not the only heavy cavalry here, as there are a couple silver helms with shields on the flanks. Together, they will form an armored mobility force to counteract the Wood Elf cavalry. In the skies here, leading the army, a single Archmage of Fire coming in with Burning Head and Flaming Sword of Ruin. And of course, a bunch of items for the magic regeneration, as well as the Armor of the Stars in case it needs to flee from enemy pursuit. As for the Wood Elves here, going for a Eternal Guard frontline here, flanked by a bunch of mobility Glade Riders and Wild Riders, going quite expensive on the mobility side here, especially with the Wild Hunters of Kernus. At the back here, more Glade Riders with spears, and also a single Wardens of Cithro, an expensive Wood Elf melee infantry with great combat stats, armor sundering, anti-lodge, and armor piercing. In the skies, leading the army, a single Glade Lord supported by a Spell Singer of Life with Earth, Blood, and nothing else, just there for the healing. And that's it for the army builds here. Let's get into the battle and get this show on the road. Normally, you would expect the Wood Elves to be the one kiting, but against High Elves, the role might be reversed, as the missile fire is very effective against all these light armored cavalry and infantry. Even if the Glade Riders or the Wild Riders are trying to chase down the Shadow Walkers, they will still get shot and taking significant damage from the skirmishing fire. On top of that, those skirmishing fire, look at how they just deleted this Spell Singer of Life. Just a couple volleys and her health bar is almost empty. If she didn't rout and stayed a couple seconds longer in front of the Shadow Walkers, she would definitely have been shot dead. The Glade Lord doesn't enjoy the sniping, as well as a single volley from two Shadow Walkers has taken out a chunk of her health. Now this Archmage of Fire attempts to chase down the Spellsinger of Life, stopping her from coming back, but a prayer of Aneth Rayma reminds her the presence of the Glade Lord, who is charging straight in for the Archmage, munching on that Great Eagle. While the rest of the front line will be engaging the Glade Riders here, charging straight into the Shadow Walkers, doing some nice impact damage, but will be screened away by spears, and the Rangers will be engaging the Eternal Guards. Their anti-infantry bonus would be really useful against Eternal Guards' light armored bodies. On top of that, they do have the martial prowess activated, so 37 melee defense right now, significantly reducing the hit chance of all these Eternal Guards. As for the back here, there are some Shadow Walkers retreating, as the Glade Guards and the Wild Riders are charging straight into the Silver Helms, but Silver Helms having that 90 armor means that they will survive a little longer in front of this onslaught of Wood Elf mobility. On the far side there, the Archmage of Fire is trying to chase down the Spellsinger once and for all, but the Spellsinger has successfully healed up quite a bit. A Burning Head is dropped onto the field, hoping to rout off the Spellsinger, but at this point, the Spellsinger, who is swift on her steed, has already moved out of the way of the Burning Head, entirely unaffected by the Burnt Leadership debuff of the Burning Head spell. In contrast, the Fire Archmage has overcommitted to this fight and will be hunted down by the Glade Lady. Over here, we have some Fireborn as well as the Silver Helms chasing down some Glade Riders, and will be returning to the main engagement soon, as the Wood Elves have somehow broken through the High Elf front line here, with the Wardens of Cithro pushing straight for the back line. Although there are not a lot of stuff for them to push, they can try to chase down the Shadow Walkers, but being shot at by the poison missiles, their speed will be debuffed to 32 only, unable to catch up with the Shadow Walkers. So the Wild Hunters of Kernus will have to do the job of chasing down skirmishers skirmishing infantry, but at the same time they're exposing themselves to crossfire from other Shadow Walkers here, gradually taking casualties from all the overwatching fire, including the Shadow Walkers that they're trying to chase down. While we hear the spears are still holding, delaying the advance of the Eternal Gods here, Shadow Walkers being chased down by Glade Riders, but they do have some decent melee stats. At 40 melee defense, they can actually hold up quite well in melee engagement and will be shooting in melee combat, chipping away the health of all these pursuing Glade Riders, while the other unoccupied Shadow Walkers are free to fire at whatever they can get their hands on, including these Glade Riders who are routing after one volley of missile fire. The good news for the Wood Elves is that the Fireborn is almost gone, with the Wardens of Sithro with their anti-large armor-piercing attacks, and the Wild Hunters of Kernus having anti-large and magical attacks to ignore their physical resistance. But unfortunately, they are focus fired by all the Shadow Walkers, including a regrouped unit, and the Wild Hunters of Kernus will be routing at the same time as the Fireborn. Now, one thing worth noting is that the Wardens have Armor of Sundering. They can debuff the armor of Fireborn and make the Wild Hunters a lot more effective against the heavy cavalry. The Wild Hunters of Kernus has taken too much damage to stay in this fight. That leaves the Wardens of Sithro alone against the Rangers, which is definitely not a great engagement for them. The Wardens being a light infantry, even if they are a regiment of renown, they don't have a lot of armor to mitigate the anti-infantry bonus from all the Rangers. On top of that, their melee defense isn't the best at 45, almost the same as Eternal Gods. So the Rangers actually have quite a good chance to punch through their defenses with their anti-infantry bonus. Now let's have a look at the rest of the battlefield here. There are some Eternal Gods way too stuck on these spears who just do not give up. Being surrounded by two Eternal Gods, they are fighting tooth and nail, only buckling just now. After all, the High Elves are known for their staunch line of spears, pinning down their enemies with their impressive defensive stats, all thanks to their faction ability martial prowess. While the rest of the Wood Elf army are pretty much in shambles right now, the Glade Lady is circling the sky trying to find someone to fight. But that means the Shadow Walkers are free to shoot her, especially with the large hitbox, slower speed as a dragon, debuffed by poison now at only 77 speed. She simply doesn't have the agility to dodge the shots, all these anti-air fire from the Shadow Walkers. On the other side, the Wardens have taken significant damage from the Rangers, but the Glade Lady is too busy fighting off the Shadow Walkers. Instead of helping all these Wardens of Sithro here against the Rangers, if she could have dived down onto the Rangers, then there will be a terror rout. But unfortunately here, with all these Shadow Walkers distracting her attention, the Wood Elf player decided to commit to fending off the High Elf skirmishers. Now on the far side, we have some Silverhelms running down some tattered Eternal Gods here. Some Glade Riders try to slow them down approaching them. Actually, they're trying to chase down the Spell Singer, who is now shattered by a volley from the Shadow Walkers. While here at the back, the Eternal Gods are still fighting the High Elf infantry here, duking it out with Rangers and Spears. Now with the Rangers bolstering the ranks of some Spears, they will no doubt be able to pull out victorious in this engagement, though it does take quite a bit of time, as the Eternal Gods do have 44 melee defense and will be holding on for a bit longer. Now, over here, the Glade Lord decided to dive down on one of the Shadow Walkers, but that is not exactly the greatest choice here, as the Shadow Walkers here have ran out of ammo. She should probably go over here and start charging down the Shadow Walkers who still have ammo and will be providing more value for the Glade Lord to kill. But at this point, the Glade Lord is extremely low on health, trying to drop in a Prey of Anaphrema to pin down the Silverhelms, allowing the Wardens of Sithro to catch up, combined with a charge from the Forest Dragon doing significant damage to the Silverhelms. But there are some spearmen closely following those Wardens and will be doing some poke damage towards their back here, although the Silverhelms did get routed by the terror from the Glade Lord's Dragon. On the other side, the High Elf forces are collecting their units, converging onto some remaining Wood Elf infantry, with the Eternal Gods here sandwiched by a rear charge from the Spears, making the Eternal Gods the one being completely surrounded, much like the Spears they routed earlier. Over here, the Glade Lord is now extremely low in health and without any healing with the shattered Spell Singer. At the same time, she is still being debuffed by poison, while the Wardens are being cut down by the anti-infantry bonus of the Shadow Walkers who ran out of ammo, pushing the balance of power closer and closer to army losses for the Wood Elves. A breath attack dropped onto the Shadow Walkers and the Spears doing some nice damage, but also the friendly fire has routed the Wardens of Sithro. Without any unit threatening them in melee, the Shadow Walkers are free to fire at the Glade Lord. At this point of battle, the speed of Glade Lord is significantly reduced not only by poison but also by exhaustion, making it even harder for the Forest Dragon to dodge those arrows' volleys. At the same time, the remaining Eternal Guards will soon fall to the Rangers and Spears combined, allowing the High Elves to secure victory. Massive thanks to Mr. Teufel for sending in this replay. For the army performances here, the Silverhams didn't do a lot of damage as their main role is to pin down enemy cavalry with their heavy armor. As for the Spears here, there's some decent performance, not exactly amazing since they're not supposed to be fighting well against all these Eternal Guards anyways, and the light cavalry of the Wood Elves are just too fast for them to catch. The Rangers definitely excel against Eternal Guards here with the lack of armor on the Eternal Guards and their anti-infantry bonus. They just slaughters all kinds of light infantry. While the Fireborn here being surrounded by anti-large units, the Wardens of Cithro and the Wild Hunters of Kernus. Unfortunately, they were not able to do too much here, especially without the Archmage support, since Mr. Teufel's mistake in the early game cost him the leader of his army. The Archmage of Fire overchasing the routing spell Singer means that the Glade Lord was able to isolate her and pick her off with her superior mount, the Forest Dragon. The Archmage of Fire could have dropped those burning heads onto the Eternal Guards and utilized that synergy with the Fireborn and Kindle Flame, providing that fire weakness and making Fireborn a lot more effective, but unfortunately, with the leadership gone early in the battle, Mr. Teufel was not able to use them well, but nonetheless the Shadow Walkers are able to carry the game here, earning back most of their value if not all of their value, shooting up all the Wild Riders whose light armor means that they can't really mitigate the damage from all the Shadow Walkers, especially when they're often shooting towards their flanks and rear, where their shields will not be able to block. Wild Hunters of Kernus earn some good value. They earn back their own cost, but unfortunately, the overwatch fire of all the Shadow Walkers are just simply too much. Even if they charge straight into the Shadow Walkers, the poison debuff reduces their combat effectiveness, and also the decent melee stats of the Shadow Walkers, especially when they're buffed by martial prowess, means that they can't kill these skirmishing cavalry as fast as they usually do. As for the Glade Lord, there's some great damage here, but eventually get whittled down by all these Shadow Walkers' firepower, since they do have a decent AP value at 5 armor piercing per shot, which is 1 armor piercing less than Javelin Cavalry anyways. And even against heavy armor units like Glade Lords on a Forest Dragon, they can still do some decent damage over time. Combined with the speed debuff with their poison, the Glade Lord became extremely vulnerable to missile fire in the late game, coupled with the slow debuff from exhaustion, further boosting the damage of all these Shadow Walkers, as they can easily hit the massive hitbox of the Glade Lord in the sky. As for the Eternal Guards here, fighting Rangers is definitely not a good engagement for them. In this matchup, I wouldn't be going for a full Eternal Guard frontline, but instead switch out a couple or even 3 of the Eternal Guards, bring some Dryads instead, as the physical resistance and the decent armor at 60 of the Dryads would have been decent against the Rangers, and their magic attacks will be ignoring the Rangers' physical resistance. As for the Glade Riders here, a couple of them did some decent damage. One of them probably got destroyed early by a combination of Silver Helms and possibly the Shadow Walker shots, so not a lot of value with the mobility, other than that one Wild Hunters of Kernus, while the Spellsinger of Life mostly there for those health regeneration, the healing spells, and Wardens of Cithro did some nice damage. Definitely the most elite anti-large infantry of the entire Wood Elf roster, but their lack of armor really limits their performance in melee fights, as they would usually take too much damage in melee engagements, making them a rather glass cannon unit. And yeah, that's basically it for today's battle replay. I hope viewers you all enjoy it, and if you do and want to see more, be sure to hit the like and subscribe to get notified when I upload new videos. And if you want to showcase your own replay, feel free to drop by my Discord or send me an email with the replay file attached. I'll be sure to check them out. And yeah, that's it for today. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next one. Tactical Lich, signing out.